welcome back to the SC Cupp Show. I'm joined now by Ryan Mauro, who is a national security advisor to the Christian Action Network. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You probably heard us earlier talking about WikiLeaks. It's this week the one-year anniversary of the collateral murder video release. So I think a lot of us are sort of looking back on the short-term legacy of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. I want to ask, 1 year later, how big of an impact do you think, as sort of a national security expert, has Julian Assange and WikiLeaks had?
I think he's opened up a whole new chapter in the history of intelligence. I think that this is going to be a problem that we're just going to have to deal with, that we're not going to be able to completely end. Yeah. And it does huge damage to intelligence gathering, because it's relatively easy to find people willing to betray their country for large sums of money, but it's not so easy to convince them that they're not going to be killed or put in jail.
Right.
And so if they think their cover is going to be blown, they're much less likely to work with the United States, even more so than they already are.
So who would you say is the bigger threat, the Bradley Manning or the Julian Assange?
Oh, easily the Julian Assange. There's going to be a ton of spies willing to do this sort of thing, but Julian Assange is the guy that orchestrates all of it. He's the one that has all the money.
And gives them cover.
Absolutely.
And gives them an outlet.
Exactly, and he does huge damage to the reputation of America. And if you're a country that the United States is trying to get a secret relationship with, you're not going to do it anymore if you think that this is going to end up in the New York Times.
Right, or Der Spiegel, or any of the outlets that Assange has apparently received some attention from.
Right.
So, okay, in your opinion, what is the best way to attack someone like Assange or another WikiLeaks? I mean, he's not, frankly, the only one out there. There are a bunch of undercover web outfits that are trying to bring a lot of this national security information to light. What do we do?
I think it's obvious at this point there's going to have to be new legislation, because the current legislation isn't working. Otherwise, we'd have him in jail for this right now. So there's going to have to be new legislation. But one of the things that really disappointed me is that when collateral murder came out, the people that had the best response and the fastest response were people on YouTube. It wasn't the Pentagon. And so the Pentagon has to be able to quickly react to these sort of things instead of just saying we don't comment or we deny this allegation. They have to come at it head on.
Well, and they have to, as you say, they have to know what they're doing. They have to have something on the books, I think, you're right, to combat this, so that we don't engage in a year-long conversation about the morality of WikiLeaks and the journalistic integrity of Julian Assange and what's legal, what's not legal. We need to have precedent here. We need to have a ready answer.
That's exactly right, and we have to.
So what is the legislation? What can we do?
Well, you can't describe him as an enemy combatant, because then that puts him on the level of Al-Qaeda, but there's going to have to be some sort of new legislation about people that are willing to harm the United States. The Espionage Act, which outlaws the transmitting of information that can hurt the United States, that can apply also to the media that publishes this. So if you indict Julian Assange, you also indict the New York Times and the reporters that reported on this. And so I think that's some of the problem here. So we're going to have to update this. Yeah,
and that gets messy for a number of reasons. There's obviously free speech issues and freedom of the press issues, and but I've called Assange an information terrorist.
Yeah.
And I think he is. I mean, that's not meant to be hyperbole. That's not meant to be sort of old tone rhetoric. I mean, that is exactly what I think he is. I think he gathers information and intelligence and uses it as terrorism. He holds people captive. He holds information captive. He threatens to release more information if anything is done to him with his insurance files. Yeah. I mean, that's terrorism in my book.
It is terrorism, because not all terrorism has to be violent. And so he's abetting
or in exchange for money.
Exactly.
Right.
So, no, I think that is a proper term to describe him, an information terrorist. And you have to remember, he likes to say that this is essential to democracy, that the flow of information leads to a more educated electorate.
Which sounds really good.
It sounds really good, but then look at whose files he's publishing. It's not the Iranian government, it's ours. And if you look at his staff, the guy that was in charge of releasing this to the Russian media was a guy named Israel Shamir, who is a Holocaust denier, who says that Ahmadinejad's re-election was a great victory for democracy, and refers to Palestinian terrorists as martyrs.
Well, yeah, and that brings up another problem here, is that when this information is simply gathered and posted, then I think it becomes ripe for propaganda use, and it can be, picked up by some nefarious news organization or government agency and used to create new propaganda wars all over the country. And there's not a whole lot we can do about it.
Right, collateral murder was probably one of the best anti-American propaganda pieces put out there, far better than stuff that Al-Qaeda puts out there.
Very effective.
Very
and
effective.
as we're seeing now with this, the pastor in Florida and his Koran burning video, that was picked up. That has nothing to do with Julian Assange, by the way. But that was picked up in Afghanistan. It's making the rounds, and it is being used as an effective propaganda weapon now.
Right.
So this information, these videos, these document dumps, I think raise a lot of questions about the spread of information and how careful we have to be.
Right. The entire system of national security is changing so quickly and so rapidly that it's hard to keep up with it. And so I think we're going to have to take a serious look at the entire national security apparatus as globalization increases and more people have access to this type of information, figure out how to get a handle on this. Because right now we're going on a case-by-case basis, but in reality, there's an information revolution still ongoing, and we have to catch up with it.
Sounds overwhelming. One final question. What do you think happens to Bradley Manning?
I think it's obvious he's going to at least be in prison for the rest of his life. I think the death penalty is very likely.
Wow, really?
Yes.
Deserved?
Absolutely. He's a traitor.
Well, that'll be interesting to follow, and we'll keep you posted. Again, you're going to hear about this all week, the one-year anniversary of the collateral murder video, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. All right, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.